When a routine traffic stop turns into a career-defining moment, a cop's worst assumptions collide with a truth he never saw coming. His target is the man who holds his future in his hands. The sun was dipping low over the streets of Atlanta, Georgia, painting the sky in streaks of gold and amber. Marcus Thompson, 42, was driving home. After a long day at the office, his sleek sedan humming quietly as he adjusted the air conditioning, trying to shake off the day's stress. The radio played softly in the background, a soothing antidote to the bustling city streets. He approached a yellow light, slowing just as it turned red. That's when blue and red lights flared behind him, paired with the sharp wail of a police siren. Marcus glanced in his rearview mirror, brows furrowing slightly. He pulled over to the shoulder, lowering his window as a police cruiser parked behind him. Out stepped Officer Ryan Mitchell, 33, with a buzz cut and a gleaming badge on his chest. Mitchell adjusted his belt, sauntering toward Marcus's car with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. "License and registration," Mitchell said curtly, his voice flat but laced with authority. Marcus complied without a word, reaching into the glove box for his registration and handing over his driver's license. His movements were measured, calm, but he felt Mitchell's gaze studying him as if searching for a reason to dig deeper. "You know why I pulled you over?" Mitchell asked, leaning closer to the window. "I'm not entirely sure," Marcus replied evenly, his tone polite but firm. "You didn't come to a complete stop at that light," Mitchell said, the way flicker of hesitation crossed his voice. Marcus frowned, but nodded slightly. "I see. I thought I slowed in time, but I understand." Mitchell didn't respond immediately. Instead, he lingered, his eyes narrowing as he studied Marcus more closely. This wasn't just a routine stop anymore, at least not for Mitchell. His posture shifted subtly but noticeably, as if he'd already decided this was more than a minor infraction. The officer glanced at the license in his hand. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked. Marcus paused for a split second before answering. "I moved here a few months ago. My address is on the license." But Mitchell wasn't really listening. His questions began to sharpen, just enough to suggest he was no longer concerned with the traffic violation. Marcus's calm demeanor seemed to unsettle him, and he leaned in closer. "Where you headed in such a hurry?" "Just going home," Marcus answered, his tone steady. "Just going home." The air shifted, a barely perceptible tension impossible to ignore. Mitchell no longer saw Marcus as just a driver. He saw something else, something that sparked suspicion. Marcus felt the mounting pressure, but didn't waver. Little did Officer Mitchell know that outward calm wasn't naivety. It was control. This was only the beginning. Mitchell took a step back, folding Marcus's documents with exaggerated slowness before tucking them into his chest pocket. He straightened, his expression shifting to something faintly smug, as if he'd already made up his mind about the man in front of him. "Step out of the car for me," Mitchell ordered. Marcus's grip on the steering wheel tightened for a moment, but his face betrayed no reaction. "Is there a specific reason for this, officer?" he asked, his tone restrained. Mitchell's lips twitched, but he masked it quickly. "I asked you to get out of the car. You don't want to make this more complicated than it needs to be." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Marcus exhaled slowly and opened the door. As he stepped out, Mitchell's gaze darted over him, sizing him up. Marcus was slightly taller than the officer, broad-shouldered, but non-threatening. His tailored suit suggested professionalism. His polished shoes hinted at someone meticulous and careful, but none of that seemed to matter. Mitchell gestured toward the front of the car. "Hands where I can see 'em." Marcus complied, his movements calm and deliberate. "Is there something specific you're looking for, officer?" Mitchell gave a faint smirk. "Just routine. We've had some incidents around here." "You can never be too careful." Marcus turned his head slightly, locking eyes with Mitchell. "Incidents involving men in business suits driving sedans? Or does this have more to do with something else?" The question landed like a blow, and for a moment Mitchell's composure faltered. He straightened, his hand sliding toward his belt more out of reflex than necessity. "Watch your tone," he said, his voice hardening. "I'm just asking a question," Marcus replied. No defiance in his voice, just a quiet firmness that seemed to throw the officer off balance. Mitchell leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "You seem awfully familiar with how this works. Got something to hide?" Marcus let the silence stretch for a moment before answering. "No, officer. I just believe in clarity for interactions like this. Transparency, you know." Mitchell scoffed but didn't respond, stepping back to pace a tight circle in front of the car. The dynamic was shifting in ways he couldn't fully grasp. Marcus wasn't reacting like most people. No fear, no stammering, no nervous fidgeting. Instead, there was poise, an unsettling calm that made Mitchell uneasy. "You seem pretty confident," Mitchell muttered, almost to himself. "Like you think you know what's going to happen next." Marcus didn't take the bait, merely tilting his head slightly. "Confidence isn't the issue here, officer. Respect is." Mitchell froze for half a second before turning to face him. The smirk was gone, replaced by something sharper, almost defensive. He opened his mouth to reply, but no words came. Marcus's composure was unnerving him, and he didn't like it. As the silence dragged on, the tension between them crackled, and Mitchell began to realize this wouldn't go as he expected. But instead of backing off, he doubled down. The real test was about to begin. Mitchell tapped his fingers on the holster at his belt, his frustration barely concealed. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like Marcus. His gaze flicked back to the sedan, as if searching for an excuse he hadn't yet conjured. "Turn around and put your hands on the hood," Mitchell said, his voice clipped. "I need to check for weapons." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Weapons?" he repeated, his tone skeptical, but still controlled. "Do I look like someone carrying a weapon?" Mitchell's jaw tightened, and for a moment his composure cracked. "I'm not asking you again." Marcus hesitated, something unreadable flashing across his face. Then, without a word, he turned and placed his palms on the hood of his car. Mitchell approached, the crunch of his boots on the asphalt breaking the uneasy silence. The officer patted Marcus down with quick, rough movements, his hands lingering longer than necessary. This wasn't just a search. It was an attempt to assert dominance, to provoke a reaction. But Marcus didn't flinch, didn't tense, didn't even shift under the intrusive scrutiny. "You're clean," Mitchell muttered, stepping back, the admission sounding grudging, as if he was irritated at finding nothing to justify his suspicions. Marcus turned to face him, expression calm, but eyes sharp. "Of course I am," he said simply. "Now, officer, if you're done—" "I'm not done," Mitchell interrupted, his voice rising slightly, the words spilling out too quickly, betraying his need to maintain control. "You seem to know an awful lot about what I can and can't do. Explain that." Marcus crossed his arms, his posture relaxed, despite the tension crackling between them. "I've had enough interactions with law enforcement," he said. "Let's just say I've learned a lot over the years." Mitchell's eyes narrowed. "So what? You a lawyer or something?" Marcus gave a faint smile. "Or something." The ambiguity in his response seemed to grate on Mitchell. He stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space, his voice dropping to a near growl. "Listen, you think you're smarter than me? Think you can talk your way out of this?" Marcus met his gaze evenly, unflinching. "I'm not thinking anything, officer. I just believe in fairness. And so far, I'm not seeing it here." The words hung like a challenge, and Mitchell took the bait. "Fairness?" he snapped. "You think fairness is for people like—" He caught himself, the words lingering like smoke, though they didn't fully escape. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable, a sign he'd caught exactly what Mitchell left unsaid. "People like me," Marcus repeated, his voice soft but heavy with meaning. Mitchell bristled, stepping back, as if realizing he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. "You know what I mean," he muttered, though his tone lacked the conviction it had moments ago. "I think I do," Marcus replied quietly, his calm no longer passive, but razor-sharp, cutting through the pretense like a blade. "And I think we both know this interaction stopped being about a traffic violation a long time ago." Mitchell opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time, he looked uncertain, as if unsure how to proceed. The balance of power was shifting, and for the first time, Mitchell was on shaky ground. But the moment of reckoning was still coming, and he'd never forget it. Marcus's voice broke the heavy silence, steady and unyielding. "Officer, I think it's time you learned who I am." Mitchell's brows furrowed, his irritation flaring again. "I don't care who you are," he retorted, though a faint tremor in his voice suggested otherwise. Marcus reached into his pocket, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm reaching for my badge," he said calmly, watching as Mitchell's hand twitched near his holster. "No need for theatrics. I want you to see this." The words hung in the air, charged with something unspoken. Mitchell's eyes followed Marcus's hand as he pulled out a leather wallet and flipped it open, revealing a gleaming badge. "Marcus Thompson," Marcus said, his tone as casual as if he were introducing himself to a neighbor. "Head of Internal Affairs, Atlanta Police Department." Mitchell froze, his gaze darting to the badge, then back to Marcus's face, searching for any sign this was a joke. But there was no humor in Marcus's expression, just quiet authority and a hint of disappointment. "Internal Affairs," Mitchell repeated, his voice cracking slightly. "My department," Marcus cut in, sparing him the need to finish the thought. "I oversee officer conduct. My job is to ensure the people who wear that badge uphold the integrity and values it's supposed to represent." Mitchell's face paled, his confident demeanor crumbling in real time. He took a small step back, his hand falling from his belt, as if the weight of his own authority had suddenly become too heavy. Marcus stepped forward, closing the gap Mitchell had instinctively created. "You know what the most troubling part of this interaction was, Officer Mitchell?" he asked, his voice calm but piercing. Mitchell didn't answer, looking like a man who'd just realized he'd stepped into quicksand and didn't know how to escape. "It's not the profiling," Marcus continued, "though that's bad enough. It's not the baseless escalation. It's the fact that you did all this without even knowing who you were dealing with. You assumed I didn't know my rights, that I didn't understand the laws you swore to uphold. And why?" Mitchell opened his mouth but said nothing. Marcus's gaze bore into him, unrelenting. "Because I didn't fit your idea of someone who deserves respect." Marcus finished for him, his words not angry, but carrying the weight of an indictment. "And that's not just a problem for me, officer. It's a problem for everyone you encounter in that uniform." Mitchell's shoulders slumped slightly, the full weight of Marcus's words crashing down on him. He glanced at the badge in Marcus's hand again, as if it might somehow vanish if he didn't stare too hard. Marcus stepped back, giving Mitchell room to breathe, but his voice didn't lose its edge. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to step back, return my documents, and think very carefully about what you say next." Mitchell's lips parted, but he hesitated, clearly weighing whether to push back or comply. The hesitation cost him. Then Marcus added, his voice lowering slightly, "You'll hear from me again. Not as a driver you pulled over on the side of the road, but as the man tasked with deciding whether you're fit to wear that badge." Mitchell swallowed hard, his face flushing under the weight of the moment. He reached into his chest pocket and pulled out Marcus's license and registration, his hands trembling slightly as he handed them over. Marcus took them silently, tucking them into his wallet. He walked to his car's driver's side door, pausing with one hand on the handle. He glanced back over his shoulder, meeting Mitchell's gaze one last time. "Remember this, Officer Mitchell," Marcus said. "A badge doesn't make you better than anyone else. It makes you accountable to everyone." As Marcus slid back into his car and started the engine, Mitchell stood, frozen in the fading light, his confidence shattered, his future uncertain. But for Marcus, this was far from over. His next move would ripple through the entire department. The drive home was quiet, but Marcus's mind was anything but. The encounter replayed in his head, not because it was unique, but because it wasn't. Mitchell wasn't the first officer Marcus had dealt with this way, and he knew he wouldn't be the last. But this time, things would be different. This time, Marcus had the authority to act. The next morning, Marcus sat at his desk, early sunlight streaming through the blinds of his office at the Atlanta Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. Before him lay an open file, Officer Ryan Mitchell. The dossier wasn't spotless. Minor complaints of unprofessional conduct, excessive stops, vague misunderstandings that were never properly addressed. Marcus leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, considering the broader implications. Mitchell wasn't an anomaly. He was a symptom of a deeper issue, and Marcus wasn't interested in putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. A knock at his office door broke his thoughts. His assistant, Sarah, stepped in with a stack of reports. "Morning, Mr. Thompson," she said. "I've got the misconduct case summary for last month, and Chief Reynolds wanted me to remind you about the department review next week." Marcus nodded, taking the files. "Thanks, Sarah. Can you also schedule a meeting with Chief Reynolds for this afternoon? I need to discuss something with him." Sarah hesitated, sensing the weight in Marcus's tone. "Of course," she said before slipping out. Marcus turned his focus back to Mitchell's file, but his mind wasn't just on the officer. This was bigger than one person, one interaction. It was about a culture that let someone like Mitchell feel justified in his actions. And if Marcus knew anything, it was that culture started at the top. Later that day, Marcus sat across from Chief David Reynolds in a conference room. Reynolds, a seasoned veteran with salt and pepper hair and a serious demeanor, leaned back in his chair, listening intently as Marcus recounted the traffic stop. "I could write this off as just another bad interaction," Marcus said, his voice even but resolute. "But that would be a mistake. Mitchell's behavior isn't isolated. It's a reflection of how much work we still have to do." Reynolds rubbed his temples, exhaling slowly. "This isn't the first time Mitchell's name has come up," he admitted, "but we've always handled it quietly, internally." "And that's the problem," Marcus replied. "Quiet doesn't fix anything. Quiet lets it keep happening. It's time to get loud." Reynolds met his gaze, the weight of the conversation settling on his face. "What are you proposing?" "A full department review," Marcus said without hesitation. "Not just individual officers, but our training, our protocols, our accountability systems. We can't keep sweeping this under the rug. If we don't hold ourselves to a higher standard, how can we expect the community to trust us?" Reynolds leaned forward, hands clasped on the table. "You're going to ruffle feathers with this?" "Good," Marcus said simply. "It's time someone did." The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, interviews, and reports. Marcus worked tirelessly, compiling data, speaking with officers, and holding public forums to hear directly from the community. The incident with Mitchell became a catalyst for change, a turning point that forced the department to confront its shortcomings head-on. Mitchell, for his part, faced an internal hearing. Marcus didn't shy away from his involvement, sitting across from Mitchell during the proceedings and watching the officer squirm under scrutiny. The hearing led to a suspension, but Marcus knew the real victory wasn't in punishing Mitchell. It was in preventing the next Mitchell. Months later, Marcus stood at a podium during a community event, addressing a room full of officers, city officials, and residents. He spoke not of blame, but of responsibility, a shared duty to build a system that worked for everyone. His words were more than a call for accountability. They were a promise of change. Justice isn't just about catching the bad guys, Marcus said, his voice carrying through the hall. It's about the people who swear to protect and serve, doing so with integrity, fairness, and respect for everyone they encounter. That's what I believe in, and that's the badge we're building here together. The applause was thunderous, but Marcus didn't linger in it. For him, this wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of a better one. As he stepped down from the podium, he glanced at the faces in the crowd, some skeptical, some hopeful, but all listening. He knew change wouldn't come overnight, but it would come. And for now, that was enough. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's start the conversations that matter, the ones that lead to change.